Good evening. It's getting late. At least where I live anyway. So I was thinking more about the Tuskboss after I made the previous video talking about it, like, you know, like what it actually does when we really look at it on paper. And I realized that I didn't speak to how many points it would actually cost for me to play it. So let's look at that. What would it actually cost? So first of all, I'm going to say this right up front. My preferred unit of measurement now is per 100 points. It's just so much more convenient. So, you know, if you hear me say like it does 3.2 damage or 3.2 whatever per 100, that's what I'm talking about. In my previous graph I was per point, but it's just such an ugly number. So if they had no rule changes, we're going off no rule changes whatsoever, what would it actually take? Okay, so if it was 280 points cheaper, okay, it would deal, because it's still not really getting any momentum, right? Like the benefits from momentum are going to be minuscule. So at 280 points, it would deal 3.2 damage per 100. So that without any, like anything. So that would put it on par with a Maw Crusher, a little bit less than a Maw Crusher. And then with Destroyer, it would be at 5.1 damage per 100. So that would make it the best, right? A little bit better than Scumdrack with Destroyer. A little bit better than a Maw Crusher with Destroyer as well. So if you were looking at just damage, you could see somewhere between, like, you know, 280, 290, 300, depending on how sort of generous they wanted to make it, counterbalanced with the fact that it brings no other benefit. It has a 3-up save, right? So it's in that 3-up, same as the Maw Crusher, right? It has a 3-up save, so it's in that club. It can take the enhancement like Maw Crusher or Weird In or something, right? Smelly In. You can make him kind of like, you can play him more on the tanky side, right? Because he's not going to deal as much damage, so maybe he can just hang around a little bit longer. But with no other utility, like 250, because the thing is that he doesn't bring enough to the entire army to the table. So then, you know, even if it was 280, it would be too expensive. I'd be like, well, for 280, I get a Sludge Raker, right? And it's gonna, like, for 280, for like, I'm getting more damage. I don't have to take an artifact to get the damage. It has, like, Scumdrack has, like, reach, right? He can reach over stuff. That's utility. He makes the archers better. That's even more utility. That's more damage that he is bringing to the table. Like, it's not even close. So 280, like, no, absolutely not. There's no way I'd take him for 280 with no rules changes whatsoever. Even like 250, when I start to think about 250, it's like for 30 more points you get a Swamp Boss. For 40 more points you get a Swamp Boss. It's like, it still just doesn't feel good. Like, I'd find those points in my list for sure. Like, I would drop Pendulum to take that Snatcher Boss over a Tuskboss. So it's got to be even cheaper than that, man. 240, 220. At 220, like, he's just, now we're getting into that cheap monster territory. Seriously though, 220, is it, like, is a Vulture Boss better if you wanted that same slot? The Vulture Boss is in the 4-up save club. So 220, is it better than a Vulture Boss? He's going to deal a lot more damage than a Vulture Boss at this point. Well, no, he's not. He's going to deal slightly, he can take Destroyer. Right, that's the thing. He can take Destroyer. So he can output, like, almost double. Yeah, 220, 230, 240, I think in that range is where I would maybe start to consider him. But he would have to be in, like, the bargain bin monster category, like a Vulture, I feel. Right? Like, the Vulture was way higher when it came out. I can't remember exactly, but it was way more points, and it's just been dropping, and people still aren't playing it at 200 because there's just better options. You know, it's not, like, it's still 200 points. To take a bad model for 200 points is not a good value, right? Like, it doesn't matter how cheap it is. If it's bad, you don't put it on the table. So, yeah, bargain bin, 220 to 240. Real bummer, right? If you were to change a rule, now it's a different story. So if you changed momentum so that it was only -1 momentum on your turn, that's a very small change, right? We're not talking about an overhaul. It's just a very little change. And then what it does, I think, is it makes everything better. Please, GW, if you're listening, oh, Mark and Gork, GW, if you're listening, please be listening right now. Please, okay. With this very simple rule change, it makes everything way better. Okay, so on your turn, if you run, you build D3 momentum. And then at the end of your turn, you lose 1 momentum. That means there's a 1 in 3 chance you're going to generate 0. There's a 1 in 3 chance you generate 1. And there's a 1 in 3 chance you generate 2. That is excellent, clean. I love it. It makes rolling that die feel important every time you roll the die. Every time now if you have a bunch of them, right? Now it's like you can build a whole bunch and you can fail your rolls. Like it's a good mechanic, right? And because it's, one third of the time each. And then what it also does, because now it's like on average you're going to generate 1 momentum every turn. So this is if you run or charge. So it means that every turn you gain 1 momentum until the turn you charge, where you gain momentum twice. And then you don't, right? So it means that you can have a list where you have like 3 big pigs, 3 groups of little pigs, right? Maybe a reinforced Gorgruntas and then 2 more Gorgrunta units with a Tuskboss and like 2 Gougers, or maybe like one of the medium ones, the elite ones, and a unit and a Gouger, right? And then maybe you have in your list also some like War Chanters or a Wizard, or maybe like one unit of Brutes, something like that, right? Like, in the back, some support. And then the pigs go in first because they're faster. And they don't build any momentum, so they get the buffs on turn 1, and then they strike in and they're faster. And then you have these big pigs in the back, and they're going to spend turn 1 like just kind of running, but not running anywhere, just like maybe like moving over onto the flank, right? Or maybe like, I don't know, going to where your army is weaker or is losing, right? And that's a cool, interesting way to play the army too, because you're going to like charge in, and then you're going to strategically move the next wave of pigs, right? You're going to strategically move them to like one way or the other. And then every turn you generate this momentum, and then when you do hit with them, and they don't even have to all hit on the same turn, you can have like one in the back, like your big pig, like your Tuskboss, who's like running sort of everywhere and doing whatever he's like supporting and doing whatever he's going to do before finally smashing in, right? Like these waves of pigs with the boss like corralling the herd in the back line before himself striking into the battlefield. Awesome flavor, awesome design. It would feel so good if like the bigger the pig, the better the buff to the momentum, and you were going to generate like on average 1 every turn. And it's and then you charge in, and it's perfect because it's a 6-point scale. So it would work well just like pacing through the game, right? If you are charging in on turn 3 or turn 4, you're going to have like maximum momentum every time, like consistently. Turn 3, turn 4, maximum momentum. You can play around it. Your opponent can disrupt it, If your opponent gets in combat with the big pig can no longer run, the big pig can no longer charge, and so the momentum is going to start to decrease, right? And you want to choose when the big pig engages, not your opponent. So it creates like interactive gameplay as well. Like it's such a small change, and it makes such a big difference to everything and then so I would say you make the rule change, right? You release the rule change and you change nothing else, right? Just the rule change. And then you wait, and then you see what happens, and then you play with points. And you play with points so that things fit in like lists and stuff. With that change, how many points would the Tuskboss and the Gougers and all that be? With that rule change, I think that suddenly, like, they still need a point decrease because they don't deal enough damage. Having like a more reliable, because you still can't really like you still can't run in charge, so you still can't really alpha strike attack with them, right? Because you're just not gonna be losing all that momentum. The Gougers, 160, 140, in that range. I think it's with this rule change, it's better than a unit of brutes. Better than a unit of brutes. I mean, close. So like 150, 160. Even with this momentum rule change, I think. No, he's a monster. It's too cheap. 160? I think he's got to be less than Gruntus. Even with the rule change. I don't know. Maybe 180 is fine. The Tuskboss I still think would have to come down. Because he's not bringing much other utility. If you price the gougers right, I think that unlocking him as battle line might be worth it, but you'd have to drop the points down. Without the it's crazy. Without this little momentum rule that I'm proposing, the cost, what I would think the gougers would have to be would be like, they got to be cheaper than Gruntus, like by a bit. 150, 140. Seriously, it's crazy. Because they just don't do anything. It would just be like meat. It's not even that many wounds. I mean, I guess it is. But like brutes, a unit of brutes has 15 wounds. Right? On a 4-up save. That's 15 wounds on a 4-up save is 2, where it's like 14 wounds. So it's not even like a wound bag. Brutes are going to output more damage. So it's like, what do you even do with that? It's a monster, right? It roars, I guess, but like you don't care really. You want damage. I don't know. Doesn't feel good. Neither does my throat. Let's make videos, Moss. Feeling sick. Sitting at my desk, make videos. Good, smart. Yeah. So there it is. There it is. I'm like just garbage bin. Even with the change, we need this momentum rule change to jump to GW. I think it's what'll save the pigs. I think suddenly they will be not only significantly better, but they'll just be way more fun to play. I mean, obviously, I think that this is the change. I think this was just an oversight. Like they're just like it. Like to me, it's and I know that it's I have this bird's eye view and whatever. So, but it's like, oh, we generate D3, but then we lose 2. It's like, well, the math doesn't work. Right? Like, the math doesn't work. You generate D3 and then you lose 2. Well, you're going to be just losing them. Right? Like, even if you generate 2D3 and then you lose 2, like, you're not going up in the moment. Like, you can't just, it's just not going to work. Right? It's like you have to, charge every turn for it to work. Like, was that kind of the idea? Like, you have to charge into something and delete it? And so then the next turn you can move and charge again. It's like but it just doesn't deal enough damage to do that. And it's so specific. It's like, oh, this thing is really good if your opponent leaves like a really flimsy unit way off on the flank, and then you can get him, and then after that you can like run and charge again the next turn. It's like what? Yeah. Like, subscribe, wah.